Hello, I'm Catherine Howe, Chief Executive of Adur Worthing Councils. Welcome and thank you for joining the webinar this afternoon. I'm really delighted to see that we've got over 80 people on the call today representing charities, local authorities, government agencies, landowners and community groups. It's just brilliant to have you all here. The session is intended to bring together some of the incredible work that is going on here in Sussex and also invite people to dream a bit about what we might do next. Pioneering habitat restoration is happening right here. New partnerships and opportunities are flourishing because of it, and there's a groundswell of public support and engagement, something that in Adur Worthing we felt really acutely when we ran our climate assembly and really saw the kind of public buy-in we have to the kind of work that you've all been doing. This session signals the next phase of the work on the idea and vision that we've been talking about as Sussex Bay. It's an ambition that has nature at its heart, that aims to connect and restore our seas, our rivers and our intertidal areas. But in addition to that, it's an ambition that recognises the tremendous opportunity to rejuvenate our coastal communities at the same time, doing that at the same time as we invest in nature. Whether that's by ensuring heritage industries such as small boat fishing can thrive, or by creating new, truly sustainable green and blue jobs. Sussex Bay, for us and for me, is about designing in balance for nature, people and planet. Next slide. I think that during this session, you're going to be hearing all about this ambition and what it means for nature restoration, as well as what it means for the residents, businesses and people of Sussex. And we're going to hear about the work streams that we've already started in order to explore some of these opportunities we have before us. But I wanted to just start with a couple of reflections on, and the first is that Sussex Bay is and always will be a physical place. It's based on a natural geography of our coast and stretches from Chichester to Canvas Sands. It's fed by 5 rivers, the Adur, the Ouse, Arun, Cuckmere and Rother, and it's a really remarkable landscape. Those of us who live here know it and love it. It is in many ways a blue mirror to the South Downs, and we have hundreds and thousands of people living in the cities, towns and villages all along the coast. At Adur Worthing Councils, and we're just a little bit of this coastline, we're acutely aware of the advantages and vulnerabilities of the coast. We've got 10 miles of shoreline in our district, and we've been thinking a lot about what it means to be a coastal local authority and our responsibility, and also that our bureaucratic boundaries have to be overcome in order for an ambition like Sussex Bay to be able to really take flight. I think if we try and constrain an idea like this just to the places that the government recognises, then we're not going to be able to really lean into our ambition. You know better than I do, though, about what's needed to restore and protect our biodiversity, and you know better than I do, because we have many experts on this call about how to help Sussex adapt to and mitigate the impacts of climate change, such as flooding, coastal erosion and increasing water scarcity. I'm here because I think that that's just the start of the work that we could or should be doing around Sussex Bay. And I want to imagine your success in the nature restoration is then a springboard to ensure that residents and businesses within Sussex are able to connect with and benefit from the natural habitats being restored in order to live a different way in the future. Next slide. And that's what it's about for me. I think this is a generational ambition if we do it right. I think it means thinking about our responsibilities in the long term. It's about working beyond those institutional boundaries and geographical patches in order to imagine what actually this could be for the future. And for me, that's not just bringing back ecosystems from the brink. It means thinking differently about how we live our lives and creating a different goal from constant growth in our economy. I think it's about, we're here to think about what it means for our children's children. To do this, we need to reframe economic problems and set new goals. We need to be aware of the ecological ceiling and a boundary that we have to strive to get within. We have to help our communities and businesses thrive through deeper connection with the natural world. We can no longer see those things as sitting alongside us separate to the nature that we sit within. Sussex Bay is a vision that seeks to tackle climate change, but it's about, for me, delivering a just transition in doing so. Next slide, please. So today really is an invitation. It's Sussex Bay is potentially a huge ambition, and as such, it needs multiple hands and minds, organisations, individuals, new partnerships, and all of us working together with that long-term vision. Many of the people who are here today are here because of their deep commitment to an ecological ambition, which I really celebrate. But I also want people to think about how we build a similar social and economic ambition so that we use the potential of what Sussex Bay could be to create that regenerative shift in our local place. So this is an invitation to you to be part of the ambition. Sussex Bay in many ways it's an idea, at the same time as being a very real place. And we want to invite you over the next few months and from this moment onwards to share in that ambition and help shape it. We want to see how the timing works. We want to see how it aligns with things like the 25-year environment bill. We want to see how it fits with Sussex Local Nature Recovery Strategy. But we also want you to learn about some of the tangible progress that's already been made in exploring some of the things which we're terming as missions, the things that we think are vital building blocks in order to move forward with Sussex Bay. The most important thing is that we invite you to get involved. Sussex Bay has potential to amplify and enable. It's got the potential to connect us together and aggregate to create something which is greater than the sum of the parts, but only if we shape it and build it together. Collectively, I think we can build something remarkable here, and I really hope that we can work together in order to fulfill that potential. Next slide, please. So just to give you a shape of the next couple of hours, I'm not going to read out the slides because I've got an absolute allergy to doing that. But what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to move on to our next speaker and ask Julie Middleton to give us some of the detail about what we're talking about. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you for inviting me today to come and just sort of set the scene for the webinar. I work for Sussex Nature Partnership, and I will talk a little bit in a second about what the partnership has been doing in this space. But first of all, I've been asked to sort of set the scene and think about where we start with this whole conversation. And the most logical place to start really is with the biodiversity emergency, which alongside the impacts of climate change is really resulting in dramatic, serious and unprecedented loss of our biodiversity locally, globally and nationally. Yesterday, you will have potentially noticed in the news that a once very common set of species, including swifts and house martins, have sadly been added to our red endangered list. What means more than a quarter of our bird species now in the UK, which is about 70 species are now on that list. Back in 2019, the State of Nature report was produced by a consortium of our conservation organisations in the UK to really try and paint the picture of the pressure on our wildlife. And it contains some really stark statistics. 1 in 7 of species facing extinction, 40% in decline. And this year, of all years, of a climate change COP and a biodiversity COP, we in the UK sit right at the bottom of all G7 countries in terms of the amount of our biodiversity that remains, and in the bottom 10% in the world. But habitat loss, species loss, poor environmental quality, this is not only affecting our wildlife, it's having an impact on people and the economy. The loss of our natural capital is gradually beginning to undermine the very basis of our lives. Next slide, please. Sounds pretty gloomy generally, but we're thinking specifically about our coastal habitats. They are facing very specific challenges in the UK. We have seen significant habitat loss across all of our main coastal habitat types in recent decades. It's in this environment we're also seeing the dramatic impact of climate change, increasing intensity of storms, sea level rise, coastal squeeze against our urban environments, exacerbating the problem. And whilst there's good work going on to restore some of our coastal habitats, since 1945, we've only been able to replace 25% of what we've lost. So we're simply not keeping up. The impacts on goods and services that our coastal habitats provide us all with are also now being quantified, and the impacts on people, communities and local economies are being felt with ever increasing impact year on year. Next slide, please. So that sounds like a pretty grim picture and is a pretty grim place to start. But I just wanted to focus on the fact that there really has been a shift in recent years to thinking much more and articulating much better why nature is important, not just for its own sake, but for what it does for us as people. And natural capital is that framework that encourages us to look at our natural assets, our habitats, our air, our water, and to better understand what and where these assets not only support biodiversity, but can help to clean our water, reduce flood risk, provide pollination, store carbon, support our fishing grounds, and provide natural spaces for the benefit of our health and well-being. Sussex Nature Partnership was set up in 2014, endorsed by DEFRA and including about 30 organisations and all the local authorities across Sussex. Its role is to think strategically across East Sussex, West Sussex and Brighton and Hove to encourage cross-sectoral collaborative working to protect and expand our natural capital. To that end, in 2019, it produced a natural capital investment strategy covering terrestrial, coastal and marine environments. And this was a really first stab at thinking about nature in Sussex through the lens of natural capital. It identified a couple of big priorities. How do we enhance the protection of our existing natural capital assets, particularly our assets at risk, which I've shown on the map here? These are the already fragmented and vulnerable habitats in Sussex at further risk from development, climate change and other factors. And the second priority was to understand how and where investment in natural capital should be targeted to do a job for us, to deliver these nature-based solutions that we need to store more carbon, improve our water quality, deliver flood risk and so on. Next slide, please. So this investment strategy provides a bit of context for today's webinar, but the new game in town is the Environment Act. And I just want to spend a very short space of time explaining how this provides us with a new opportunity locally to really think strategically about nature's recovery and to work together to create a shared vision and set of priorities. It will be done through a mechanism in the Act called a Local Nature Recovery Strategy. 50 of these strategies will be prepared across England, most likely at the county scale. And the responsibility for each of these will sit most likely with county councils. The precise arrangements as to who will lead them and what the geographies of these will be determined by the Secretary of State in the coming months. And the responsible authorities for those processes in Sussex should be known by about April and May next year. Work can then start, and it probably will take about 18 months or so to complete. And a key point to remember is that they will be done through stakeholder engagement. They will set out visions, priorities, and that they will be spatial and will map where and how nature needs our help through habitat restoration, and where specific opportunities and project proposals can be brought forward by stakeholders for funding and future action. This is the first time we've ever had a mandate to deliver a local spatial strategy for nature's recovery that's been set out in law. And they're a really exciting new opportunity to set the local context and, if you like, create a roadmap to take us forward. Next slide, please. So this is, these strategies will give us all an opportunity to get involved. We'll be able to help shape and build on them. But the challenge will then remain on how to deliver action on the ground, to move from strategy to delivery, if you like, to bring partners together to design projects, to make money flow, to deploy the capacity and expertise to restore the habitats that we need to the standard and quality required. And that's the tricky bit. And given the extent of the habitat loss I've just outlined, this needs to happen at pace and at scale. And this is the space that I think Sussex Bay can step into, can play an absolutely pioneering role in identifying connecting projects, sharing learning, fostering a spirit of ambition, innovation and opportunity, demonstrating what is possible, and ultimately accelerating action and delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Brewer. I'm Director for Sustainability, Digital and Resources at Adur Worthing Councils. And we've heard from Catherine how Sussex Bay offers us this generational opportunity to work together for nature, people and planet together, to work beyond those usual boundaries at nature's scale. And that feels so critical. And particularly, as we've heard from Julie, that to meet these strategic nature recovery goals, which are really significant, we do face challenges in project development, in investment, and of course in project delivery. Next slide. So over the last few months, we've been thinking about those challenges, the challenges for nature restoration. And I think these are challenges everywhere, They're UK-wide and actually they're international. And as we've already heard, we need to really develop new ways to work together in local partnership to unlock that funding and to accelerate project delivery. And alongside integrated restoration approaches and projects, as we've heard already, we must really work to maximise those co-benefits to fishing, to ecotourism, to take the opportunity to engage communities, to deliver those health and well-being benefits that we know are really there, and also to help unlock new business opportunities all along our coast. So today we really want to launch a process and ask for your involvement in asking some really key questions. How can we drive large-scale integrated restoration across Sussex Bay? How can we work at whole ecosystem and catchment level? How can we work to connect funders and investors with local projects and match demand with supply? How can we help projects deliver projects with landowners and perhaps bring those and aggregate those together? Can Sussex Bay help organisations more effectively meet their obligations and their climate change promises? How could Sussex Bay help provide the public narrative for this shared work and improve community engagement and understanding? And of course, what new governance would be needed to support this kind of work? Next slide. So as Catherine mentioned earlier, we've started to identify 5 what we feel are really connected missions to help us explore these questions. So the first one we'll hear more about is around integrated blue restoration. And in this mission, we'll develop our university research partnerships and explore approaches to project assembly and building those larger integrated programs. Missions 2 and 3, sustainable fishing and ecotourism and recreation, they flow from the delivery of those increasingly diverse and productive habitats. How can we support a resurgence of small boat and recreational fishing along the coast? What kind of new ecotourism opportunities could be nurtured and supported? And the 4th mission that we've heard from Julie around natural capital funding models, and this mission is going to explore how we can generate sustainable investment and attract that mix of private and public finance that we think is so crucial to fund these large-scale habitat restoration projects in a really virtuous circle. And finally, that underpinning piece around new forms of governance and infrastructure, we think that will be crucial work, and this mission is going to explore and define that space that Sussex Bay could fill. And this is by no means to suggest that there aren't an incredible number of activities already underway across these missions. It's not by any means a blank page. This is about bringing together, connecting and showcasing existing projects and case studies, supporting existing forums and networks to maximize their impact, while identifying those new gaps that we've started to identify and take those new opportunities. In the case of sustainable fishing, for example, we know that there's an amazing and long-standing project in Hastings with its own sustainable fishing brand, and that the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership, for example, have also been working really significantly in that space. So those experiences and learnings from those well-established initiatives will be vital, and we can really think about how to spread those around the whole of Sussex Bay. We really want to amplify and accelerate what we already have. So by exploring these missions as a connected whole, we believe we can build something really quite unique in Sussex Bay that helps our communities transition, as Catherine mentioned, nature, people and planet together. Next slide. And just to say a little bit more about integrated restoration, and we'll hand over to the experts very shortly. It really is at the heart of the Sussex Bay ambition, building back those fully functioning, diverse ecosystems, rivers and seas connected. Ray Ward from Brighton University is going to speak very shortly to talk about the importance of catchment level restoration. Crucially, bringing these habitats and these habitat projects together in this way could also help us unlock opportunities for funding that individual projects may not be able to unlock on their own. A diversity of habitats within Sussex Bay is a helpful thing. Some have stronger evidence bases than others at this very early stage of blue habitat and natural capital. We're really keen to inspire and connect these blue habitat projects right along the Sussex Bay coast to build in that resilience and to create ever more opportunities. So work in this mission will also be about joining up with other connected projects in more of the green spaces that we know and love, such as Wheel to Waves, which is a fantastic project that's underway. And I know folk are on the call from that this afternoon. By connecting and fitting these fairly big jigsaw pieces together, I think we can really play a big part in truly landscape scale change all across Sussex. Next slide. So as Catherine's mentioned, Sussex Bay is really an idea that we think will really help us all engage our communities and our businesses. I think it's something which is potentially very simple and understandable by the public and allows us to avoid too much jargon, to create a space for ideas and inspiration. And it's an intentionally simple and open idea to allow people to engage and dream, as Catherine mentioned. So we invite you this afternoon to imagine a future where Sussex Bay is renowned for its restored habitats, is known for its locally caught sustainable fish, is a haven for responsible travellers seeking amazing nature-based experiences, and is a place that inspires and incubates entrepreneurialism, supporting innovation in truly sustainable green and blue industries. Next slide. So we're already working with a wide range of partners, and you're all on the call this afternoon. We really do have a remarkable and strong partnership. And I think the diversity across that partnership is a really core strength and is what is new for us and very exciting. In the next phase, we want to broaden the network further across both East and West Sussex, to take the opportunity to get you involved and to include your projects, large and small. And I think working together, we can really help amplify all of our work, all of our shared work, and drive that nature recovery at the scale and pace that Julie mentioned. And I'll now hand back to Catherine to introduce Mission 1.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, as Paul says, we're going to have a bit of a deep dive, if you'll forgive what's almost a pun, into the integrated blue restoration mission. And we're going to hear 3 real flagship examples of the work that's already in action here. We're going to close the section by hearing from a group of divers who've been inspired by the local habitat restoration. And they've engaged thousands of other people in the process of seeing nature return, which is amazing. But first, we're going to hear from local archaeologist James Sainsbury about what restoration of our heritage landscape means to him.
My name's James Sainsbury. I'm the Curator of Archaeology at Worthing Museum, and I run the Arun Valley Archaeology Project. I often lead heritage walks up and down the Adur Valley. The history of the Adur estuary goes back all the way into the Paleolithic. That's well over 30,000 years ago. About 1,000 years ago, the Adur estuary was used as an extensive salt farming area. This was a really important commodity for the preservation of foodstuffs, and actually meant that the Adur estuary was one of the most populated areas in the whole of the country, as recorded in Domesday Book around 1086 AD. I'm really excited about proposed plans to restore areas of the Adur Valley. The Adur River behind me connects downstream to the kelp restoration project in Sussex Bay and upstream to the large rewilded estate at Knepp. Having all 3 of these sites connected will amplify the benefits not only to the natural world but also to community and to the heritage sites. This would increase the amount of nature coming into the valley and also mean that the community can engage with the landscape more than they currently can. It's really important that projects like this go ahead due to increasing pressures from climate change and urbanisation, so that people can actually connect with the natural world and their heritage landscape, which leads to greater community cohesion and also greater community health.
Brilliant, thank you. I'd like to introduce Dr. Ray Ward, who's going to talk to us about integrated blue ecosystem restoration.
Hi, yeah, hopefully everyone can hear me. So yeah, Dr. Ray Ward, Reader in Marine Science at the University of Brighton. And I've been working on quite a few of these kind of restoration type projects here in Sussex. Next slide. So what do we mean by integrated restoration? What we really mean is simultaneously restoring multiple kind of integrated, linked type habitats and ecosystems. And it's really important to maintain a wider vision, so get an idea of not just what you're doing on your project, but also get an idea of what others are doing around you. It's also really important to take into account connectivity. So then we're sort of thinking about selecting restoration locations based on a kind of a wider viewpoint. Okay, if you've got something like something that's being undertaken in the Adur, what's actually happening further up in the catchment and what's happening further down in the marine environment. And it's really important to take that into account, because those habitats will together provide multiple ecosystem service benefits to a wider range of people. And it's really important to combine forces, to work with other organisations, whether it's government organisations, or whether it's something more like universities, or whether it's kind of the site kind of Environment Agency, Natural England, or other types of organisations there, to maximise those outputs that you're set to achieve. Next slide. So what do we mean by those sort of intertidal coastal marine habitats? Next slide. Or next tab. So we mean our salt marshes. So there's a picture from the Adur. You just saw a really good video set around the Adur. Next slide. Then we're talking about our macroalgae, our kind of seaweed habitats, particularly those kind of large three-dimensional macroalgal habitats such as kelp. Next slide. Then we're talking about our seagrasses, which we have a range of here in Sussex. Next slide. And we're talking about our oyster and our mussel type habitats as well. So all of those provide multiple benefits. Next slide. And what are those benefits that they offer? So we kind of term those as ecosystem services. From our coastal ecosystem services, we often focus on coastal protection. So that's when we're thinking about decreasing wave activity, which kelp, seagrasses, salt marshes, and other marine habitats actually do really well. Also sort of decreasing flooding in an area. Next slide. Then we can think about promoting tourism and recreation. There's a pretty picture of some cuttlefish that I've seen in the macroalgae just here off of the coast of Shoreham. Next slide. Then we can think about improving water quality. So there's that improvement of water quality, but these systems can actually be emitters of pollution where they're degraded. So it's really important to take into account that excellent ecosystem service where they can actually improve water quality. Next slide. Food production. So obviously that three-dimensional habitat of the kelp, that provides an excellent habitat for a range of commercially important species. But seagrasses, salt marshes, they provide that ecosystem service, particularly for juvenile commercially important fish species. So it's important to think about that from a kind of integrated system perspective. Next slide. And then obviously the one of the really sort of topical focuses is around carbon storage and sequestration. And our coastal systems can store between 10 to 100 times more rapid rates of carbon locked away than our terrestrial systems. So they can be really, really important from that climate mitigation perspective. Next slide. Now, all of those systems that I mentioned above are under a kind of real rapid loss and degradation. So I've got there some numbers. So 50% of UK salt marsh has been lost already, currently losing 100 hectares a year. So that's still continuing. And 57% of that that's left is in an unfavourable condition. So they are obviously not providing the same level of ecosystem service that they should do. 90% of UK seagrasses have been lost, and half of that has been lost in the last 30 years. 96% of the kelp in southeast England has actually been lost in the last 40 years, and 95% of UK oysters have actually been lost. So that's real large-scale losses. Next slide. Causes of loss are really quite varied, but it could be nutrient-enriched waters, which we've seen particularly in our kind of Sussex coastline recently, trace element and heavy metal contaminants, land use change, climate change, dredging, trawling, anchoring, all of those. And particularly when they're combined, they can have a substantial impact on those ecosystems that I mentioned previously. Next slide. So it's really important to focus on restoration. And we need to look at the relationships between species and habitats to assess what are those combined and benefits, and how they amplified by this integrated restoration approach. It's really vital to note that removal of stressors is fundamental. If you're not removing those stressors, then restoration schemes will not work. And it's really important to take into account off-site impacts, particularly if we're thinking about what's happening in the marine environment that's affecting our terrestrial or intertidal systems, and what's happening into our terrestrial environments that's impacting on our marine systems. Next slide. So we've got a range of different research and monitoring schemes in Sussex, as well as restoration schemes. We've got this really good Adur saltmarsh restoration scheme that's being undertaken in the Shoreham area. There's the macroalgae recovery project, which Sally will talk about next, and that's the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project. And then we've got Seagrass Ecosystem Service evaluation, and there's a really good restoration project that's being undertaken at the moment. I'm going to wrap up there, and hopefully we've maybe gained a smidge of time, and I will pass over now to Sally Ashby to talk about the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, hi, I'm Sally Ashby from the Sussex Wildlife Trust. And yeah, just going to give a very quick headline run through of the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project, which is an ecosystem restoration project covering 300 square kilometres of Sussex seabed. Next slide, please. So historic evidence has shown that there was once vast kelp beds extending from Selsey to Brighton. And next slide, these have all but gone. There's about 4% left. So as Ray mentioned, that's a huge loss of habitat and ecosystem. Next slide, please. And so thanks to the work of the Sussex IFCA, they introduced, realizing this huge loss of habitat, they introduced they proposed a nearshore trawling bylaw to exclude trawling from the area and give the seabed a chance to recover. Next slide, please. And so thanks to the work of the Sussex IFCA and the support of the Help Our Kelp campaign and Sir David Attenborough supporting that, the nearshore trawling bylaw was approved this year in March, so March 2021, and the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project was launched. Next slide, please. And so, as you can see from this map, this highlights the key area of historic kelp bed, where you can see the sort of wider trawler exclusion zone, but the actual exclusion zone extends all the way from Chichester to Rye, extending out a kilometre from shore. And in this particular area where the historic kelp beds were, it extends out 4 kilometres. Next slide, please. And so, as been talked about, ecosystem services, why do we need nature? And particularly, why do we need kelp? Kelp is critical for food security, providing vital nursery grounds for commercial fish species. It's critical in terms of biodiversity, providing that crucial habitat for a whole host of marine species. And in terms of climate, kelp forests are one of the most productive ecosystems on the planet. Next slide, please. And so the science of ecosystem restoration is complex, and even more so in the marine environment, which is particularly dynamic and complex. And for that reason, we ensure that we are in alignment with the 10 principles that underpin ecosystem restoration as developed by the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. But also in terms of, from a sort of ecological perspective, if you look on the right, this kind of circle is an ecosystem assessment wheel. And as you can see, there's a whole host of different factors that need to be researched and analyzed to in order to establish what condition that ecosystem is in. So whether it's species composition, the threats that are posed to it that Ray mentioned, for example, how the ecosystem is functioning. So our project is having launched this year, is very much about gathering that baseline data and ensuring that we move forward in a way that is ethical and just and in alignment with the 10 principles. And next slide, please. And obviously, there's a huge amount of interest in kelp in terms of the climate. Just really to say that obviously with the climate crisis, we can't solve it without restoring nature at scale. Obviously, Sussex Bay is an example of that, of the level of scale that we need to match the extent of habitat loss. But it's about restoring fully functioning ecosystems. So it's not just about one species and not just about carbon, but about building resilience into those ecosystems so that they can respond to climate change. Next slide, please. So ultimately, it's about rewilding our seas, because if nature is thriving, then we thrive. Next slide, please. And that's why a critical element to the project is putting people at the heart of that ecosystem. You know, much talk about rewilding or restoring nature can be perceived to be excluding of humans, but we are equally part of the ecosystem. So putting people at the heart of the restoration is critical. Next slide, please. And that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Peter King to talk about the Adur River Restoration Project.
Thanks, Ali. Hi, everybody. I'm Peter King, Director of the Ouse and Adur Rivers Trust. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the River Adur and some of the work being undertaken there to create a more resilient catchment. Next slide, please. So just to orientate you, this is a map of the River Adur catchment. It's got two main arms, the western arm, which rises up near Itchingfield, and the eastern arm, which rises in Lower Beeding. These two meet about 2 kilometres north of Henfield, where they become a single embanked channel that flows for about 9 miles before reaching the coast at Shoreham. Next slide, please. The catchment covers around 500 square kilometres. It comprises of 19 different water bodies, none of which meet the good ecological status under the Water Framework Directive, and all of which fail under chemical status objectives. The main reasons for this are associated with physical modifications such as weirs or artificially modified channels, straightened rivers, along with pollution that comes from a number of different sources. Obviously, this entire catchment flows into the English Channel, and therefore a healthy river environment has an important role to play in the vision of Sussex Bay. Next slide, please. So currently, we're the Adur Rivers Trust, funded by the Environment Agency and working in partnership with multiple stakeholders, are developing a catchment-based approach to work with natural processes and implement nature-based solutions to provide multiple benefits in improving the condition of the Adur for both people and wildlife. This work blends existing evidence with landowner engagement to target locations for interventions. So, for example, this map here on the screen shows outputs from SciMap, which gives you the relative risk of fine sediment input across the catchment and highlights a high risk between Hayward Heath, Southwater and Calfold in the north, as well as the northern slopes of the South Down. So currently we're targeting these areas, and visits are being undertaken to ground truth this data, but also to design appropriate solutions. Next slide, please. So that's a very, very brief overview of quite a big project working across the whole catchment. But we also wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the exciting things that are happening locally in the Adur district. So next slide, please. At the bottom of the catchment, there's a developing opportunity to really enhance the wetland landscape and ecological connectivity along the coastal strip through the strategic enhancement of these 3 sites, 2 of which, New Salts Farm and Pad Farm, have recently been purchased by Adur District Council. Next slide, please. So the first of these is at Sompting Brooks and has recently been completed by ourselves with a grant from the Heritage Fund. So this project has realigned a 1 kilometre section of chalk stream and installed sediment traps, which are then capturing pollutants that are coming from the surrounding road network and also the industrial areas. And this stream flows into the coast of Brooklands Lake, so it's actually preventing quite a lot of pollution reaching the coast of Brooklands Park. This has also created 7 hectares of wetland wildflower meadows, 4 ponds, about 2 hectares of wetland, and 2.5 kilometres of new hedgerows. It's now open to the public and is being very well used. There's a new river trail, and our monitoring data shows not only are we significantly improving water quality, but actually there's a 98% increase in species diversity across the site compared to the pre-project monitoring. Next slide, please. To the east of Somerton Brooks is New Salts Farm. This is a 70-acre site that holds great potential to create a habitat matrix, which also includes extensive wetlands alongside the realignment of existing channels. Meadows and hedgerows and areas of natural regeneration are also being considered, alongside space for long-term community involvement in things such as sustainable food production, beekeeping, maintaining tree nurseries or community orchards. There's an awful lot of ideas kicking around at the moment, and we're going through a process of assessing these. The vision here is to create a centre of excellence for educating and engaging residents and schools to enable us to promote climate mitigation and sustainability. We also hope to use this site as a demonstrator for net zero or even carbon negative project delivery. At the moment, we've had an expression of interest accepted by the Heritage Fund and are working very closely with Adur District Council to submit a first phase application in mid-2022. Next slide, please. And this is Pad Farm to the north of New Salts Farm, and this is being investigated for its potential for intertidal habitat creation by either removing or altering the existing embankments. The results of the feasibility study are due early next year, and if viable, there is potential to almost double the amount of salt marsh habitat in the estuary, bringing multiple benefits, obviously, for climate mitigation, biodiversity, and river health. However, if it's unsuitable, there's also great opportunity to create more freshwater wetlands and other exciting habitat. These three sites, we hope, will become a fantastic asset to the vision of Sussex Bay and engaging people with nature and their natural surroundings. We also hope that these can be seen as the first step in wider nature recovery network strategies. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, it's a really exciting time for the River Adur. There are a lot of projects being delivered or developed, most of which we don't have time to talk about today, and some you're probably aware of, but all of these are contributing to a more sustainable and healthy future for the river catchment and the associated coastal and marine habitat. That's me done. I'm now going to pass over to Lou Parker, who's going to tell you about a new flood protection scheme.
Hello, hi guys, hi, thank you for inviting me today. Hello, my name's Lou Parker, and I work for the Environment Agency, and I'm a senior advisor on the Pevensey to Eastbourne Coastal Management Scheme. Next slide, please. This is the new flagship coastal risk scheme for this area of coastline. It's one of the largest coastal flood risk projects in the country. It's a partnership project with Eastbourne Borough Council. And it covers 15 kilometres of coastline from Eastbourne through to Pevensey Bay. We're looking to invest around sort of 140 million over the next sort of 100 years, which is the lifespan of this forward. And that's from flood defence granting aid monies, which is effectively taxation money from HM Treasury via DEFRA to us. Next slide, please. So just to give you the main objectives of the scheme and maybe provide more links to this conversation today. That one of the primary objectives is this is a flood coastal risk management. So we're looking to make those communities at risk resilient to coastal flooding and adaptable to coastal change in the future. And our current modelling indicates that we have 10,000 properties at risk and a wide spectrum of wider infrastructure. Objective 2 and Objective 3. So as we all know, we're suffering with climate change, and we have to mitigate that. We're predicting sort of a metre level of sea level rise over the next 100-year period, with also increased storminess. So two critical kind of objectives for us are to reduce our carbon. So we're looking to become carbon net zero by 2030, and also looking to increase our biodiversity net gain across the project by 20%. And we're looking at solutions around blue and green infrastructure integration to the development of the scheme moving forward to achieve this, which will come on to in a second. just to touch lightly on objective 4 and objective 5, but engagement is critical, is a main sort of success factor for us in terms of delivery of the scheme moving forward. So we want to put engagement at the heart of the development, so we can work with the communities and wider stakeholders to shape the development of the scheme moving forward. And that's integral for us to ensure that we're hitting those wider benefits in terms of what can be achieved in terms of dovetailing, regeneration and social and economic regeneration. Next slide, please. So how are we looking to hit those challenging targets around carbon and biodiversity and really look at those sustainable solutions moving into the future? Well, where feasible, we're looking to work with nature. So we're looking to develop and integrate nature-based solutions into the development. So that's exploring opportunities and habitats which can deliver a coastal risk management benefit in terms of wave absorption, in tandem with absorbing carbon and creating habitats, so biodiversity net gain. So we'll be exploring rehabilitating and reintroducing habitats such as kelp, seagrass, or shellfish reef. We recognise that this is quite a lot of unknowns around that. So we're looking, what's critical for us is to work in partnership with groups such as yourselves and universities to ensure that we are complementing and supporting existing work, not duplicating it. We really want to work in partnership around this. We've also secured 250,000 and working in partnership with the Regional Coastal Committee to pioneer new research around this. But ideally, what we're really looking to do is model, to create a model for this scheme in terms of how we can create that intertidal and offshore habitat, and then share that with other coastal management forward. Next slide, please. So we're at the very early and preliminary stages of our thinking. So, but our current appraisal of the situation kind of indicates that potentially the natural restoration of kelp and seagrass may not lend itself specifically to our area coastline, because we don't really have the subject to enable that to happen. So the project team, as part of this as well, are exploring other opportunities as well. So that could include creating artificial habitats such as oyster reefs and maybe reefs with kelp attached, which also provide the potential for ocean farming. So we're thinking around sort of marine parks. This is very early days, and I'm doing a little bit of crystal ball gazing here. But, I must stress that, you know, this is preliminary, but farming in terms of fishing communities and wider partnerships will be central to any decision forward. But we are exploring the opportunities that can provide and the multitude of benefits. I mean, around its sustainability, around no water, no feed, no fertilizer, and the wider things that it can be used for in terms of pharmaceutical, food, cosmetics, fertilizers. Obviously, the fishing communities are central to that decision, but there's also opportunities around that providing maybe alternative fishing practices which may be more sustainable and may also offer higher economic value, and also the wider social and economic benefits and ecotourism that provides. So I'm running out of time, so I'll pause there. Yeah, that's just to our website and our email address, I think, is in the chat. So if you have any wider questions around the project, please do get in touch. I look forward to working with you all in the future. And I'll pass on now to Katrine Priestley.
Hello, I'm Katrine and I'm from the Sussex Underwater Facebook group. We are a group run by local people for local people. The group was first set up by a local diver, Steve Allnutt, at the beginning of this year. It is now run by a group of local divers. They witnessed firsthand the destruction of the seabed from the trawlers over many years, and felt that this had gone unnoticed and unchallenged, because to so many people, the sea was out of sight and out of mind. So the Sussex Underwater Facebook page was set up to show people what was happening under the sea, and to hopefully capture the return of the kelp beds in Sussex. We now have over 3,500 people in our group, and some of our posts reach over 100,000 people. It shows that local restoration projects like this are inspiring people to want to try to help.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think, as is picked up on the chat, I think we've showcased just a tiny slither of some of the amazing work that's going on. And I do think I find it particularly inspiring just seeing how that really affects local people, and how local voices could be part of this work. So we're now going to move on to our second mission, which is about sustainable fishing. And in this session, we're going to hear about what's being done to enable the supply side of this sustainable fishing equation and what we're doing to help grow demand. Through all of this, the importance of working in partnership with local fishing communities, a few of whom we'll hear from at the end of the session. But first, I'm going to hand over to Tim Dappling from Sussex IFCA. Thanks, Tim.
Hi there, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. Delighted to be part of this event this afternoon. My name's Tim Dappling, Chief Officer for Sussex IFCA, and I'm going to be talking to you briefly about how we achieve sustainable inshore fisheries in Sussex. So next slide, please. So the IFCA is one of 10 IFCAs around the coast of England. We are statutory bodies that were established in 2010 under the Marine and Coastal Access Act. And we're funded through the upper tier local authorities, which is East and West Sussex County Councils and Brighton and Hove City Council. And our responsibility is to manage inshore fisheries and protect the marine environment in MPAs. Next slide. This is a quick slide just showing our extent of the district from the West Chichester Harbour, as you can see in the far left, through to Rye Bay, and the magenta lines show the 3 and 6 mile limits. The outer limit is our 6 mile extent of the district, which covers in total about 550 square nautical miles. Next slide, please. So we take a strategic approach to our planning and our management. We have a 4-year planning cycle and annual plans and reports. And in doing so, we take into account the following principles for development of our management. We use the best available evidence, working with a range of sources, our own information, government bodies, NGOs, universities. Importantly, we take an ecosystem approach to our management, which means we're understanding the inshore marine environment and essential habitats and the role they play in the ecosystems and how we can protect them. We manage by reducing the impact of fisheries on those functioning ecosystems. And whilst we do that, we recognise the practical constraints on inshore fishers in terms of how they can operate within the marine environment and the size of the vessels and the limits that they have. In our area, the maximum size of vessel is 14 metres in length inside 6 miles, and the vast majority of vessels are under 10 metres in length. And in delivering our management, we consult carefully with the communities and work in partnership to achieve our outcomes. Next slide, please. Part of our key long-term work is the collection of the right type of data and information to support our management. These are just some illustrations of some of the information we collect on fishing activity and different densities or intensity of activity in certain areas depending on what type of method. And illustrated here is some potting in the top left showing the intensity down towards Selsey Bill. And in the right, we have netting and shows the intensity in the middle of the district off Shoreham. And as you can see, the trawling intensity to the left, this was prior to the introduction of our trawling management, shows that it's well spread throughout the district along Shoreham, Brighton through to Selsey Bill. Next slide, please. Another key part of our data collection and our work is the development of our habitat maps. Here you can see some images of different types of seabed type. We have a great diversity of that within the district, from sediments, fine sanded sediments in the top left through to some sort of rather murky looking reef in the bottom right, and obviously everything between in terms of say cobbles and gravel seabeds. And if you combine that with, next slide please, this, which is the life form diversity that lives on that geology. Here you can see some examples such as kelp, piddock worms in the bottom right, which bore into the soft chalk, and a cold water coral in the top right, so Ross coral. We can combine those to the next slide, which is a habitat map for our entire area. And this habitat map is absolutely critical in informing our management and informed the development of our most recent work on the nearshore trawling bylaw. So this is held by the Biodiversity Record Centre. We work with them in terms of storage of key information, and you can actually look at this online and even look at the some of the individual surveys on YouTube videos. Next slide, please. So over the last 8 years, since we were established in 2010, we've been introducing a number of bylaws that provide a very comprehensive suite of management within our district. There's various ones here. I've highlighted obviously the nearshore trawling bylaw in red, but we have other bylaws that covers all our shellfish management in terms of traps and pots. And we also have a bylaw here which covers the extent of our marine protected areas and management within those to protect the sensitive features. So it's a comprehensive package of bylaws that is delivered through our statutory duties using the evidence we have and working with the community. Next slide, please. And what does that deliver? Well, in terms of our inshore fisheries, it provides the following: a higher level of management inshore to achieve sustainability. We are managing in accordance with FAO and Marine Stewardship Council principles of sustainability. We don't have industrial fisheries inshore in the context of large offshore trawling and dredge fisheries that you will see further out in the channel. We manage holistically with an ecosystem approach. We encourage low impact gears and sustainable practices. Our fisheries are associated with small vessels, as I previously pointed out. Our inshore fish and shellfish are landed and marketed in Sussex. We've got locally sourced products with no AMRs and a low carbon footprint. And we support the local communities, the employment and the cultural heritage. So summing up, next slide, please. We really have a strong opportunity. I think we can agree to support and promote sustainable inshore fisheries and the fish and shellfish from the Sussex IFCA district. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over now to Morven Robinson from Blue Marine Foundation.
Thanks very much, Tim, and hi everyone. Really pleased to be here today. I'm from the marine conservation charity Blue Marine Foundation, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about our work to support low impact fisheries across the UK and here in Sussex. Next slide, please. So Blue was set up in 2010 to tackle the crisis of overfishing in our oceans, and today overfishing remains one of the biggest threats to ocean health. And it's not really bad, not only causing massive declines in fish stocks and destroying habitats, but having a really big impact on many coastal and fishing communities that depend on fish for their livelihoods. Here in the UK, over 75% of the fishing fleet are under 10 metres in size and fish under really challenging conditions and are under increasing pressure from declining stocks, competition for fishing grounds, gear conflict, and all of this is being exacerbated by climate change. Through our work at Blue, we try to work with fishing communities to support them and make sure that they can not only coexist with conservation initiatives, but benefit from them. Next slide, please. One of the fishing communities that we've been working with for quite a long time is communities down in Lyme Bay. There are 4 ports there made up of very diverse fishing communities. And it was really back in 2008 when the government created a large marine protected area that completely removed trawling and dredging, very much like the bylaw that Tim just told us about that Sussex IFCA brought in, that we were approached by the fishermen who, although were very happy that this designation had come in, had become concerned about increasing levels of other kinds of fishing. Next slide, please. And together with the fishermen, we formed a partnership, a consultative committee with all the fishermen, local regulators, scientists and NGOs. And for the last over 10 years, we've been working together to sustainably manage fisheries and other activities within this marine protected area. And one of the main things that we did was support fishermen to bring in limits on the fishing they were doing and make sure that they were within sustainable limits. And we invested in research to really make sure that was kind of the right limit, and their fishing activities were having a minimal impact on the seabed, and that's been led by the University of Plymouth. And I guess most importantly, and maybe relevant to this section of today's webinar, is we took the time to really understand from the fishermen what would help them to get the kind of best out of the conservation designation. And we invested in chiller units, ice machines, ice boxes, and other kind of infrastructure to increase their catch quality, alongside a reserve seafood label that promoted their catch. Next slide, please. So along the journey, 10 years, we've learned a huge amount, and we're working with many other fishing communities around the UK. We've really learned that you need to invest time in building relationships and trust. You need to understand what fishermen and their communities actually want. There's no point in doing things that they don't want and aren't going to kind of be there in the long term. And we really believe at Blue that fishermen should carry out research and be involved in it. And we try to pay fishermen as well day rates that we can conduct the research on their boats, and support, as I said previously, initiatives that really try to improve quality and marketing around what they're landing. And really importantly, not only do we need ecological research, but we need to be able to monitor the socioeconomic value of these schemes and these partnerships. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest bits of research that we did was undertake a socioeconomic study looking at how the fishermen part of our project were kind of faring in terms of their well-being and livelihoods compared to other fishermen. And the study undertaken by Plymouth and Exeter University found fishermen part of the scheme in Lyme had the highest job satisfaction, highest income, and lowest levels of stress and conflict. So we've really been able to prove that these models can have a huge impact on fishermen's livelihoods, and when they're involved in conservation, it has really good results. Next slide, please. So now what we're doing in Sussex, we're obviously just at the beginning of our journey, and we're starting to meet with fishing communities and really understand the pressures that they're under and the aspirations that they have now that, you know, really amazing thing has happened. This bylaw has given a lot of fishermen hope, especially fishermen in Bognor that we've been working with, who have bought back their boats because they now see a kind of viable future for themselves. And I kind of mentioned that need for research, and we've undertaken this year a socioeconomic survey to benchmark where local fishing communities are at the moment in terms of their livelihoods, in the hope that in a few years, 5-10 years, we can do that kind of survey again and look at the impact some of these schemes that are just beginning are having. We're also investing time in looking at some of the biggest pressures fishermen have said themselves they feel the local environment is under, including sediment. We had a big workshop on sediment earlier this year. Next slide, please. So very whistle-stop tour, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's a little bit about what we've been doing. And I'm now going to hand over to Sarah Hunt from Adur Worthing Councils, who's going to be talking about developing a sustainable fishing brand. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name's Sarah Hunt. I'm a project developer working on Sussex Bay, and particularly with regard to the opportunity for a local sustainable fish brand. Next slide. We want to bring the fishing community, enable them to benefit from the nearshore trawling bylaw. There's a couple of challenges we face in doing that. One is that the fishers are not set up to sell in the most efficient way. There's no ice or refrigeration, meaning catch has got to be sold very quickly after landing. There's no regularity of supply for customers. People are unaware of where and when fish is available. The second challenge is that consumers are unaware of the credentials of fish which is locally caught by the small boat fleet. The IFCA has previously explored the possibility of a MSC certification, but that was not deemed viable. So can we create a Sussex Bay brand and link fishers with consumers and help to solve those supply chain problems? We've put a bid into the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme for funding to produce a report which explores the viability of this brand. And in that, there are two strands feeding into the report: engagement and research. Next slide. So first strand, engaging with different audiences. You can see from the slide what we plan to do here. We need to establish if there is a demand for sustainably caught local fish and whether we can create one. And are fishers interested in this opportunity? What are the needs and wants? Next slide. The second strand is researching the opportunity. There's a lot of data already in the IFCA. Are there any gaps in that data as to what species are locally abundant? We want to help consumers select sustainable fish. Can we build on the Marine Conservation Society's Good Fish Guide? And what can we learn from other projects in the UK, such as Lyme Bay and Hastings? What differentiates Sussex Bay from those projects? What lessons were learned and what factors mean that Sussex Bay is more or less likely to succeed? Next slide. Part of the project will be, of course, defining what the Sussex Bay brand stands for. We need to make sure consumers know that the inshore fishers face tougher regulation than those operating on larger boats further out at sea. Tim has mentioned in his presentation some of the benefits of the inshore fleet. Some more are listed on here. The definition, though, is open for debate. We haven't decided upon anything, and it may well be that we don't actually use the term sustainable. Nothing is set in stone at the moment. Next slide. So funding, we want the project to be funding to be iterative. We want fishers to have a stake in what they're doing. We can help to a certain degree, but we want the model to be self-sustaining, potentially something as simple as an ice vending machine. The Rotunda project, so the estates team at the council is already working to make the disused rotunda in East Worthing into a point of sale. Fishers have expressed an interest in doing this. They're interested in taking on the lease. Some fishers are not so keen, but maybe we can persuade them once they see the Rotunda project is up and running. Next slide. We want to harness existing partnerships. We've learned from initial investigations that lots of the organisations along the coast listed on the slide and many more are interested in a model which supports the local inshore fisheries. We want to try and identify and coordinate what's already there, accelerate and broaden what's already happening and connect it together rather than reinventing the wheel. We want to pool resources as much as we possibly can. Next slide. What does the future look like? The project's already underway. It's at its early stages, but we want an open dialogue with all stakeholders. The workshops we plan to have will feed into plans. The Rotunda project is happening. Can we build upon that? Can similar projects happen along the coast? We just want to know your thoughts and ideas regarding the Sussex Bay Sustainable Fish Brand. Thanks for listening.
My name's Warren Brownrigg, fisherman, Worthing Beach.
And I'm Greg, his father, another fisherman. Father was a fisherman when he left the Navy.
And I went to sea as a young kid from about the age of 6. By the time I became a teenager, yeah, I loved it and knew what I wanted to do when I left school.
They keep on about miles, don't they, and the carbon footprint and all the rest of it. Where this is caught within a couple of miles of the shore and brought straight here. No miles at all.
What we do is sustainable, and I think the public need to know that, don't they?
Yeah.
As far back as history books go, there's fishing boats on Worthing Beach, and now there's so few, it would be a shame to lose that, I think.
My name's Paul Marchant. I'm the chairman of the Worthing Fishermen's Society, and we're trying to keep this way of living on Worthing Beach going. We're working with the council to try and protect the fishing community. The trawlers used to come in so closely you could throw a stone and hit them. But since they've gone, this year there's been mackerel. We haven't seen mackerel for ages. It's been bream, the bass are coming back in abundance. It's just bloody lovely. People like Warren behind me are coming back down the beach because it looks like they're going to make a living again. At last, as I say, the council are working with us. At the moment, we're hoping to get a fish market on the beach further along toward Brighton, but on Worthing Beach, so that people like Warren behind me can get ice in the summer to keep their fish fresh. And they're asking us what equipment we need on the beach, how they can help, any of their resources they think we can use. It's just nice to see things coming together.
yeah, I'm hoping to be down here for years to come now.
I think the future for fishing on Worthing Beach is looking really good.
Brilliant, isn't it? I find it amazing to see the success of the work that you've already done in that film, as well as the potential. So thank you, everybody. We're going to take a really quick break, and we want to be back here at 18 minutes past. So that hopefully that's just time for a cup of tea, and then we'll do the second half. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you very shortly. Hi folks, welcome back. I hope you managed to get a cup of tea or whatever was necessary in that very short break. So in the first half of our webinar, we heard about our integrated blue restoration mission, and we also heard about the sustainable fishing mission. The next mission we're going to hear about is going to be another way that residents, businesses and visitors can connect with the restored habitat. So in a way, this is the next layer of the Sussex Bay potential, and that's ecotourism. Talking about this is going to be Nick Hibbard from Brighton and Hove City Council. We're also going to see a couple of videos from local people who've got a huge passion for the wildlife and the outdoors, and as a result, their communities have seen a huge uptick in followers, particularly during COVID, when so many people found such comfort in nature. So we're going to start on this mission over to Tony Benton from the Shoreham District Ornithological Society.
I'm Tony Benton from Shoreham District Ornithological Society, and I just want to share with you what a brilliant place this is for connecting to nature. At this time of the year, and particularly at low tide, it's possible to see greenshank and charismatic kingfishers, as well as oyster catchers, redshanks, little egrets and grey herons. During lockdown, my organisation noticed a huge upsurge in the number of people that were interested in birds and photographing birds. So we started a Facebook page, Shoreham Birding. In a little over a year, we went from 0 to 730 followers, and I think that's just a testament to how interested people are in birds and using birds as a conduit to connecting with nature and the natural world. And we all know why. Connecting with nature is good for our physical well-being, and it's good for our mental health and well-being as well. We think that the time is right for more investment in green and blue natural capital. It's good for people, it's good for nature and birds, and it's good for the planet. So what's not to like?
Good afternoon, everybody, and my name's Nick Hibbard. I'm the Executive Director for Economy, Environment and Culture at Brighton and Hove City Council, and I just wanted to say just how fantastic the contributions have been this afternoon and how it's great that the City Council in Brighton and Hove can be part of the Sussex Bay initiative. I'd like to spend the next few minutes just thinking about the opportunities that Sussex Bay presents us to support our local visitor economy, particularly as a brand for and an opportunity to develop ecotourism. Next slide, please. Firstly, it's worth just pausing to think about what do we mean by ecotourism. I think we can use the terms eco or sustainable tourism interchangeably. The World Tourism Organization defines sustainable tourism as a kind of tourism that completely considers the economic, social and environmental repercussions in such a way that satisfies the needs of visitors and the host communities, and seeks to address the needs of those tourists and the economic interests of those tourist businesses in such a way that reduces the negative impact on the local environment and its inhabitants. And I think it's important for us to reflect that in terms of the visitor economy, sustainable tourism is no longer really a niche. It's not a luxury. It's really become a goal for the entire industry. So as we think about our local visitor economy, we need to support that sector to be able to orientate towards that goal. And I quite like to think about the notion of responsible tourism, which is when we're thinking about how tourists and visitors actually provide a direct benefit to the area. So rather than leave no trace, but actually what do you actually add? What do you give back as a visitor in terms of the direct benefits to environments and inhabitants of that area? And I think it's a real opportunity for us to do this through Sussex Bay. Next slide, please. It's worth just recognising the importance of tourism to Sussex's economy. You know, we have over 60 million visitors a year, generating about £5 billion worth of economic impact and supporting over 74,000 full-time jobs. What's interesting though within that is that only 11% of those visitors are overnight stayers, but those overnight stayers make up about 50% of the visitor spend. So one of the challenges and one of the opportunities is how do we have a visitor economy that supports people to stay overnight and to turn those day trips into overnight stays, turn the mini breaks into longer stays. And how do we tap into an increasingly massive consumer demand for sustainable tourism with tourists telling us that they want to make more sustainable travel choices, that they want to positively impact on the local environment, and through COVID that people are thinking much more sustainably. Next slide, please. And it's in many ways there's a massive cultural heritage, a rich cultural heritage and history for us to build on. Of course, Dr. Richard Russell pioneered ecotourism in Brighton and Hove when he promoted the health-giving benefits of the sea. And we've got lots already in place that we can build on, both the Living Coast UNESCO Biosphere accreditation. We've got the South Downs National Park mirroring Sussex Bay, as Catherine said. And Sussex Bay gives us a real opportunity to build upon this, to align our tourism strategies, to promote our local attractions and products, and to help visitors gain a much deeper connection and understanding about how they can play their part in the restoration of the bay. And it also gives us an opportunity to draw visitors to new areas. We find that a lot of our visitors are concentrated in the urban areas or in the sort of particular honeypot areas. So we'll be able to spread visitors across the bay, but also spread the season and iron out those sort of peaks and troughs that we get during the season so that we end up being a truly year-round destination. And then on top of that, there's a massive opportunity to promote health and well-being. And we've really seen that during lockdown, people really discovered nature, took more time to embrace an outdoor lifestyle, being more active, taking long walks, cycling, visiting green and blue spaces. And there's a real opportunity for us to enhance health and well-being through a Sussex Bay ecotourism strategy. Last slide, please. Thank you. And then it's worth thinking about the attractions, the products and assets that we have across Sussex Bay that we can exploit and unlock to really encourage visitors to have an appreciation of the environment. And as Paul said earlier, we want to really amplify and accelerate what we already have. And there's so much that we could touch upon, and I won't list them all. But what I think is really missing is an opportunity for us to use Sussex Bay to have an overarching identity that helps us to promote and root these experiences in our Sussex land and seascape. So Sussex Bay in a way sort of gives us that brand, it gives us the golden thread and helps Sussex Bay to become synonymous with quality, sustainable tourism, with conservation and restoration embedded at its heart. And it gives us the platform to connect all of the offerings that we have across the Bay and be able to get a much better, deeper level of market income so that individual towns and villages and businesses are able to sort of work together to achieve more than they would be able to achieve on their own. Overall, I think there's a big opportunity to think about how the Sussex Bay provides an opportunity for the wider economy and to provide a brand that links Sussex to the environment and connects visitors with the fantastic environment that Sussex Bay offers. And I think now we're going to see one of those local voices that's using the environment for health and well-being.
My name's Jez. I've been kite surfing over 20 years. Over the last 20 years, the sport has progressed an insane amount. And we see kiters all the way from Goring, Littlehampton, Lancing, Shoreham, Brighton and Hove. The beaches here are fantastic and make excellent kite surfing for all levels of kiting. From May through to October, you get an excellent wind thanks to the South Downs that generate a weather effect which gives a better sea breeze. Lots of people ask how I feel about the ocean when I'm kiting, and it's hard to explain really and put it in words. You're looking out the window when you're at your desk and you see that the trees are moving or the leaves are moving, and all you can think about is getting back out there and going kiting. Yeah, we have seen a huge uptake in the sport over the past year. People like being out in nature, especially on the water, and kiters are absolutely no exception. It's just an amazing feeling, it's an amazing sport, and it keeps you fit and healthy.
Okay, so that looks amazing, but there's absolutely no chance I'm going to try it. I am more of a kayaker myself, but isn't it incredible? And thank you, Nick, for that overview. I'm going to introduce now the fourth mission, which is our Natural Capital Funding Models mission. And that's really an emerging science about how we manage to unlock investment in a way that's appropriate into large-scale restoration. So our first speaker, who I'm afraid to say had COVID while he recorded this, so extra thanks, is Dan Crockett from Blue Marines Foundation. And then we're going to hear from Paul Brewer again and from Alicia Gibson from the Natural Capital Finance Specialist Finance Earth. So over to Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan Crockett. I'm Development Director of Blue Marine Foundation, and I lead on all of our work with regards to blue carbon and ocean climate change. We have had an incredibly exciting year being approached by numerous different investors who are seeking blue carbon credits, and we've ended up doing a large piece of due diligence work seeking to offset a portfolio of 1.6 million tonnes per annum, which even at a conservative estimate of $10 per tonne would mean around $100 million into ocean conservation and restoration projects over 5 years. Through this process, we've become experts in the different habitat types and the ways in which they sequester and store carbon, how much carbon they store, and the value of restoring them. There's two key things that we've realized. The first is that whether it's salt marsh, which has so much potential, both in terms of managed realignment or restoration, whether it's seagrass restoration or indeed conservation, or whether it's some of these exciting but less understood habitats like kelp, it's really the value of the co-benefits provided by these habitats that will contribute to a very exciting future for them. And another thing that we've realized is how little we actually understand about blue carbon yet. And I think we are all in agreement that we need transparent and robust and trustworthy evidence across the board to make this very exciting conversation real.
Thank you. My name is Paul Brewer, and hi again. So as you've heard from Dan, it's really exciting but early days for Blue Natural Capital. But we have already been successful in Sussex, securing support from central government to develop the evidence base and these financial approaches. And as we've just heard, there's huge investor interest in blue natural capital opportunities, not just blue carbon, but also ecosystem services like natural flood management, biodiversity and water quality. And we are really at the very beginning of the journey, but I think really well placed to develop solutions with all of the projects we've heard about this afternoon underway in Sussex, and to work with these projects and other projects across the UK and indeed internationally in what is a groundbreaking field. We really want to create the models and approaches that will help future projects in Sussex Bay and as I say, further afield too. For example, with the support from DEFRA and their Natural Investment Readiness Fund, we're working with the Crown Estate to explore a seabed lease for nature. And that should provide an underpinning for marine natural capital approaches of all sorts, as well as exploring blue carbon. We want to explore marine biodiversity net gain approaches as well. And as you heard from Pete King earlier about our 2 demonstrator projects on the Adur River, we're hoping to work with DEFRA Test and Trials to explore blended finance models as we begin to understand the new ELMS scheme contained in the Environment Bill and how it could interact with other funding options. And we really want to take our local farmers on that journey to really understand how funding models may work for them as they explore the future. Natural capital finance experts Finance Earth are helping us in these projects to help us develop these approaches, and I'm delighted to introduce Alicia Gibson to give us a short overview of natural capital investment and the initial work that's needed to create the foundations for Sussex Bay.
Thank you, Paul, and very nice to see everyone. My name's Alicia Gibson and I work an Associate Director for Finance Earth. We're a social enterprise and regulated investment advisor working specifically to develop new business models and bring in investment into nature. So actually next slide, just covering off some of the work that we do. We work across both advising on specific projects and then designing suitable financing structures all the way to then managing funds while supporting the science base and advocacy required to actually build the market around this, just to ensure the right players are involved and that the government is supporting the right initiatives to bring in incentives. If we go on to the next slide. So why are we even looking at this? So recently, the Green Finance Institute released a report finding that there's a huge amount of investment, up to 97 billion is needed in the next 10 years to deliver the nature-based outcomes that the UK is planning to achieve. And there's nowhere near the amount of committed spend over that time period. So what we look at is opportunities to redirect capital that's currently going into mainstream finance into the right kind of outcomes for nature and try and address some of that funding gap with different forms of capital. If we go on to the next slide. And effectively, this doesn't always play a role. So it's really important to note that finance is just a tool that can be used in certain situations. So particularly when outcomes from nature have the opportunity to generate income streams based on their benefits that they deliver, and that might be through sort of a sale of a commodity or potentially a service, or through an enterprise and potentially a cost saving. And based on that, typically there's quite a long time lag until the project is able to generate that benefit. And so investment can play a role in delivering the restoration and all the activities in advance before then the project can start generating the benefits. So it bridges that time gap between the project's funding needs and the outcomes. And so really critical, especially in sort of uncertain outcomes delivery and early stage and restoration, to bring in some funding that really enables the scale of delivery before any of the outcomes can be achieved. We go on to the next slide. As Paul's mentioned, so we're working with Adur Worthing Councils and the wider Sussex Bay Partnership with funding from the government's Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund, who are really, really interested in developing new business models for natural capital restoration in Sussex Bay. Is the only kind of blue focus project. So a lot of people are interested in it. But recognizing that some of the work is early stage. So the project's focused around understanding the existing evidence base, working out the kind of science that's needed, particularly focused around where new business models can be developed and what the kind of investment needs are, even if it's pre-investment coming in to develop the science, understand the restoration approaches, work out what the costs are and the viability, and develop the investment case. So our aim is to work with potential buyers, look at the vehicles that need to be set up with capabilities to attract investment, and also share the learnings and build capacity to develop these approaches elsewhere. So it's great that such a wide range of initiatives are going on. If we go on to the next slide, just to bring it all to life, there are a real wide range of income streams that could be delivered in Sussex Bay. A few potential examples include sort of the ones here around carbon from restored kelp or salt marsh, biodiversity credits from either the blue or terrestrial habitats, and development of enterprise that we've just heard of, ecotourism, and then wider flood mitigation and water quality benefits from restored habitats. So these are the kind of opportunities we're exploring based on what we've designed in practice elsewhere. So just some examples, we've worked with the RSPB looking at a wide range of projects that I've just included here. So for example, we raised commercial finance to acquire land to protect this important bird species, the sill bunting, which was experiencing loss from development impact based on future income that might be achieved. And by the end of this investment period, they'll then own the land and have a self-funding habitat to support the sill bunting and wider benefits. We're also working to develop a network of cafes on reserves, bringing investment to support them before, again, the asset can be created. We've blended funding streams to create a floodplain to protect communities, blending together Section 106, flood mitigation and community funds. So these are some of the examples of where income can be developed and investment can really play a role in delivering these projects at scale. So it's not just the piecemeal funding that comes forward. Next slide. But as I said, the work is highly innovative. A lot of work is required to build that evidence base in Sussex Bay. We've come across challenges already in terms of the state of scientific research across the ecosystem benefits, particularly in we're originally looking closely at kelp, but we're expanding that, looking at the sort of salt marsh and wider habitats, working out the evidence that's needed to acquire, and then associated to that, getting more certainty around both costs and potential revenues that be created, and gathering the data on other ecosystem benefits, and then working through the approaches to address the challenges around any license that's required and the actual restoration approaches, looking at both active and passive approaches, to work with the most appropriate investors, technical delivery providers, and working closely with the Crown Estate on leasing approaches. So a number of work streams that a lot of learnings will come out through that. Final slide. So as part of our next steps to develop these business models, we're working closely with the research plan group, looking at both the scientific and technical areas to align the potential investment approaches, what research can support that and work together. We're looking at the costs and process and timescales to gather information and deliver any activities in Sussex Bay. And then we're developing that investment proposition to take to funders to actually deliver the required research and build up over time how that business model can be developed and investment at a broader scale can be brought in. Thank you for listening, and please get in touch if you have any questions down the line.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Alicia. So before we move into what will be a brief but meaningful question and answer session, we're going to talk a little bit about getting involved, starting with some introductory words from Charles Clover, who is the Exec Director of the Blue Marine Foundation. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Charles Clover, Executive Director of Blue Marine Foundation, a charity that was born out of a book I wrote called The End of the Line. It was a book about overfishing around the world. I've written a sequel to that book. It's called Rewilding the Sea, and it shows how overfishing, habitat destruction, and carbon emissions are intertwined, and how we can reverse all those bad things, just as you are doing here in Sussex. I'm incredibly excited about the Sussex Kelp bylaw and the things being done in Sussex's coasts and estuaries. There are parts of UK where some of the things that you're doing are going on, but not all of them at once, and that's what I think is so impressive. There's of course much more to be done. Flagship projects like you're doing in Sussex need support from everyone, particularly the business community. The kelp, for one, is not recognised, nor is the seabed as a sink of carbon, which of course they are, but this is yet to be defined properly, and we're going to have to persuade people, not least in the government. So there is an enormous amount to do. The ambition should be huge because this is a hugely important thing that you are doing, and we will support you all we possibly can, because we know that only by succeeding in a wonderful project like this in Sussex can we actually pull off that global goal. So good luck. I'd love to hear what comes out of today.
And a huge thanks to Charles and to everybody who's contributed this afternoon. It's been absolutely amazing. We've heard from a number of projects about the amazing progress that's already been made across these different missions. And of course, in the chat about so many other projects that we want to connect to and to build that sense of a wide range of projects that can help each other thrive. So how to get involved? We would love to extend our networks to build a further set of conversations around these missions. And so we want to, in January, invite you to come and be a part of these conversations within each of the missions. As we've heard, there are 5 to explore: integrated restoration, sustainable fishing, ecotourism, as well as the natural capital work. And the 5th will be to start to explore the governance and infrastructure that will be needed to tie all of this together. So we really invite you to come along on the journey, to sign up to a mission. There'll be a survey that we issue out for you to tell us how you've found the webinar, but also to show your interest in joining up in one or more of the missions. We're really keen to get started with mapping existing networks and projects and groups to make sure that we're not reinventing any wheels, but to make sure that we create that foundation of what's already there across Sussex Bay, as we've heard today. So thank you ever so much for coming along, and I'll hand back to Catherine, I think. I think we've got another slide. If you go to the next slide. Just some indicative timing around the missions and working through into partnership membership and governance. Simply over the next 6 months, we're expecting a period of mission development and conversation, starting to explore governance requirements, and no doubt in April and then in June we'll come back with webinars and events to share the journey more widely. But back to Catherine.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul, and from me as well, a massive thanks to all of our contributors today. It's been amazing to hear such a range of activity and also that potential for what we could build together. Also like to say big thanks to Di Allcroft and her colleagues at Way Forward for getting us all organised and putting everything together. Before I move on to the questions, we're going to do a quick live poll to try and get a sample of what you found interesting. We're particularly interested in getting a sense of the balance between the different missions. So if you could let us know, that would really help us in terms of shaping what we do next. Now, in the questions, I've picked up some particular ones that I've already picked up. There's a kind of a few themes. So one is it's really clear that we haven't picked up all of the fantastic work that's going on across the area that we're sort of describing as Sussex Bay. We will go through the chat and gather those, but we can also, if you could also get in touch with us if you've got bits of work that you think are particularly key to be connected. And that links us to the second thing that's coming through, and a couple of very good questions that were answered, is the intention is that we are creating a forum and we are creating sort of a connected community of these projects. So what we're hoping is that the projects which are a bit further ahead are going to be able to help the ones which are perhaps sort of like getting off the ground. And our intention is we gather those together and we help people make those connections. So let us know if you've got a project up and running, or let us know if you've got something there's just a glimmer in your eye and you would like to do. I'm hoping that the buckets of the missions that we've described are going to give us a good way of organising some of those conversations, not to create straitjackets, but just to create a bit of focus for the different interests that people have. That leads me to the other question that came up right at the beginning, but there was a whole set of questions about what the exact geography is of Sussex Bay. And I think in classic facilitator fashion, I'm going to open that up to the panel because there were particular questions about how far does it go out to sea? Where does it go sort of from east to west? How far inland and things like that? And I wanted to throw it open to panelists. I can sense maybe a panelist could just like either put their hand up or just like have at it if they'd like to comment on that question. And I suppose before anybody does, I'm a social scientist by trade, and I think that one of the interesting things about place is it's shaped by narrative as well as by geography. So I'm not sort of entirely surprised that a question about exactly where it is one of the ones we would probably need to spend a bit of time discussing. So does anybody want to have a crack at that one? And a request as well for panelists to put cameras on, if that's okay.
I'll have a go, Catherine, if I may. I think it's really important for us to sort of draw an idea based on the natural geography about what we think Sussex Bay roughly equates to. But I think in the missions, particularly mission 1 around integrated restoration, that in a sense we should let nature do the talking for a bit and really understand what those integrated restoration plans might be and what geographies that starts to suggest to us. Broadly speaking, we've wrapped our arms around Sussex as a coastline, and I think in terms of going out to sea, clearly the IFCA district is key. We may want to discuss in the missions going out further and see what the benefits of doing that are, but that would be my sense of an indicative area open for discussion. Don't know
Brilliant.
what others think.
Feel free to argue with them or respectfully disagree or enthusiastically agree.
Hi there. Yes. Well, obviously on my presentation, I included a chart of the extent of the Sussex IFCA district, which extends 6 miles seaward, basically from along the entire coast of East and West Sussex, and that provides you with a sort of a legal boundary, as it were, for the management of fisheries inshore within that context of having a clear geography. I appreciate that might not necessarily align exactly with some sort of, if you like, natural boundaries, but it does give you a sort of legal framework in terms of a boundary from a fisheries perspective.
That's really helpful, Tim. And I think one of the things that's interesting again in that geography question is how do we use the kind of like the bureaucratic boundaries helpfully without them limiting how we're working, because sort of nature doesn't see some of those things. And it's certainly something as a local authority we wrestle with, which is we have a mandate over a place, but we feel a sense of responsibility over something a bit wider. Any other comments on that?
Catherine, hi. Just to say really that many of the stakeholders that you would have included in your Sussex Bay geography as it's drawn now are actually people thinking across Sussex as a wider geography anyway, you know, that they sit within either the Nature Partnership or other entities that exist across East West Sussex and Brighton and Hove. So there's always the opportunity to, even if you're geographically defined as a smaller area of coastline now, that you can draw in and communicate and share and engage with people across that wider geography.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good, I think that's a really important point, and perhaps, you know, sort of particularly as you start to get going, is that keeping the boundaries as a question mark is quite helpful as things start to form and start to shape. There's another sort of bit of a conversation in the chat as well, which is about the sort of like, again, it's another definition question, which is around, do we talk about sustainable, do we talk about responsible, you know, sort of there's a whole set of language in that, which, you know, many of us are experts on the call with bringing our own language to this, but I don't know whether or not people particularly wanted to comment on that. I think Morvin, you'd leaned into that question a little bit in the chat, hadn't you?
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, at Blue, we do try to use terms such as low impact fisheries or responsible fisheries. I think that infers that the methods, it kind of, I guess, puts more of a spotlight on the methods that are being used to catch fish, and I think slightly removes the fisheries or the conversation away from the fish stocks and how much pressure they might be under. So a lot of the problems we have with the fish that inshore fishermen are targeting, as they belong to much larger stocks that move and cross boundaries and are subject to, could be subject to big fishing pressure elsewhere from industrial fleets or kind of other unmanaged fisheries. So we tend to just try and encourage the public to recognise that they're being caught with much lower impact methods, and that's the kind of method we should be supporting, because they don't have impact on the seabed and more selective in the way that they fish. So I think responsible and low impact are terms not just being used by fishermen and NGOs, but the government as well in their policies that are developing at the moment.
No, that's really helpful, and I think also talks a lot to the evolution of the language in this space, and how it's really important that we understand exactly what we're each talking about, particularly when you've got so many people coming from so many different areas of expertise to collaborate. I think we've got, in like proper game show style, I think we've got the scores on the doors in terms of the balance of the interest for people. And so that's really helpful for us in terms of how we plan the kinds of events that we're going to do going forward. Don't want Nick to feel too sad about the ecotourism one there. I'm really interested in that. So look, we're going to continue to pursue all 5 of these missions, but probably what we'll do is to keep kind of like the ones where we can see that there's a much wider set of interest, is we'll just give extra emphasis to how we're making sure we're sharing in public, and perhaps do some of those bigger sessions. Some of the others, we might have a smaller but perfectly formed group. It's also fair to say, as Paul said at the beginning, we don't see these as the last 5 missions. It's not kind of like do these things and Sussex Bay will be created. We just see these as the places, firstly, in terms of the nature restoration, where there's already such an amazing amount of work. Really, it's about connecting and amplifying it. And in some of the other areas, it felt to us, particularly actually as we start to talk about governance, and all of those infrastructure things, that they're the foundations that we need to build in order to contain the ambition for Sussex Bay. So there's a lot here to do. I think Matt's point actually about how do we then work into that formal system of planners and politicians, and I think that's a problem that a question we'll probably hold in that governance and infrastructure work stream, to make sure that Sussex Bay can crack on with its work. At the same time as we're making those connections into the system that, to be honest, we're also trying to change and shape as much as we're trying to respond to. So I'm really excited about today, and it feels really inspiring to be with 100 people who really care about dreaming about something this big, and dreaming about something that could be possible for generations, but also doing it in a really practical way that's based on work that we can put on our wellies and we can walk around stuff now. And I think that's a real privilege. Over the next few months, our intention is to start to give it a bit more form, a bit more shape, make sure that we've got those projects connected, that we're creating those forums where people can be supporting each other and learning from each other. And making sure that we've always got in our minds the fact that this is a project and an ambition of place, and that we need to make sure that it works for the people of Sussex Bay as well as for the nature that we aim to restore. I think it's an incredible opportunity, and thank you so much for all the work that's got it to this point. Can't wait to see where we take it. I'm going to leave us playing out now, I think appropriately, with one of our final local voices films from some Bognor fishermen, because I think it really shows what's possible and what we're trying to achieve. I really look forward to seeing many of you again at future events, and as we said, we will be gathering people back together again in the new year. In the meantime, go well, enjoy nature, and have a lovely, lovely Christmas. Best wishes.
I've always loved fishing, I've always had a boat. It's like having a pair of shoes, having a boat for me. My father-in-law, I had the greatest respect for him, and I really did get on well with him. I can remember something he said to me. We were cod fishing just along the beach. He said, "How'd you get on?" I went, "Yeah, we've had a brilliant day today, really hit the fish today." And he opened the basket, because we used to cover them over, and he went, "What's that?" He said, "What are you doing?" "Well, how many cod are you going to catch in August?" "Well, we don't." "No, exactly. You leave your lobsters till August, catch your cod now and a few crab, because them lobsters now are gone. You're not going to catch them again in August. You can't keep fishing everything for today. There's got to be something for tomorrow." The reason I stopped fishing in 1999 was that I couldn't make a living out of it, and the weather was really bad, and we'd had 8 or 9 weeks. Bills were mounting up. I couldn't earn a living out of it anymore. How true he was. Those words really mean a lot to me, that, you know, we need to be looking after what we got, because there ain't a lot left. We want to put something back now. We want to still show that we can catch fish and there's fish to be had. We've got to give the edge. We've got to give the percentage back to the fish, not us have the percentage on the fish. Today is what we normally do. It's my fishing day. We went off and we get given what we get given. In other words, whatever swims into the net. We've managed to stop the pair trawlers. The fish life coming back inshore now is just incredible. It really is, and it ain't taken long. We have never seen so many pods of dolphins as this year. It's part of what should be out there. Everyone should be entitled to see that. The kelp beds are very important. We used to have big kelp beds inside here. That's all gone. It's literally gone. It used to be just a forest. Why is it gone? My theory is that the water temperature has warmed up, and I think kelp doesn't like the hot, warmer water. Secondly, we're getting more summer storms. So the kelp gets knocked off when it's still growing. By doing what I'm doing, which is using trammel nets, gill nets, I can go out there and earn a living selling it to these people that love it. They absolutely love it, and they will keep coming. And they're going, what are we having tomorrow, Clive? What's on tomorrow, Clive? They'd eat fish 4 or 5 days a week because it's lovely. They'd sooner eat that than eat meat.
It's not processed, it's reasonable price, and they're catching sustainably, so it's all good.
Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
It's local traders, so I'm all for it.
This is what we've always done. We've always sold fish like this.
All along the south coast, there are fishing communities who are doing the same type of work, and we really should be, as residents, we really should be supporting every effort to improve the state of our coastal waters.
I want to be able to carry on doing what I've always enjoyed doing, and I would love to see 2 young, 3 young, 4 young lads come along and go, cool, we'd love to be part of that. We want to do this. This is something we want to do, you know. That's how we started. It's how Terry started, how Dick started. Within a mile of this bit of beach where we all started, we loved it. And we grew up on this beach. Look at that. How can you not want to grow up with that? It's just, wow, you don't get better than this.